Welcome everybody to this very important meeting this afternoon in Europe. It's morning in the United States and in Latin America, afternoon in Africa and in Europe. And welcome to all of the members of the Farm Labour Organising Committee who are participating in this event. We are honoured to be able to participate. The struggles that you have against suppliers of BAT, against BAT itself, and your ability to come together, organise together under the fantastic leadership of one of my heroes, Valdemar Velasquez, is just fantastic. So welcome to all of the faith leaders participating. It's very important. We are so grateful that you are assisting these workers in this most important struggle, which has been going on for more than 10 years now. Welcome to all the allies and friends of FLOC, and welcome to the IUF affiliates, the affiliates of the International Union of Food Workers, of which I have the privilege to be the Assistant General Secretary. It is my job to, along with Valdemar, to chair this meeting and be a master of ceremonies as we go through this. We have affiliates, secondly, sorry, I should apologise for our General Secretary, Sue Longley, who is unable to be here at the beginning of this meeting, but hopes to join the meeting before the end of the event. Affiliates of the IUF are present from Africa, from Asia Pacific, from Europe and Latin America, all here to support this major and important campaign by our affiliate, the Farm Labour Organising Committee. And we also have a special guest, Congresswoman Mercy Kaptur, of which we're extremely honoured to have her, Congresswoman Kaptur, participate in this meeting, and I look forward to hearing from her later. So just finally, please again remember to keep to time the people who are speaking and participating in the meeting. And this is a very, very important meeting. And I will say to you just before we start that there is an online campaign just launched as we start by the IUF and Labour Start. And that online campaign, you can find the link in the chat. And please click on that link as this event progresses and add your name to the message that is going to British American Tobacco. And it's quite a clear message going to British American Tobacco. It says, please engage in discussions with FLOC immediately to resolve human rights abuses in their suppliers' farms in North Carolina, and please hold your supplier farms to account for the human rights abuses which are taking place. So we'd appreciate it all if you go in and support that campaign as we move along through this important event. Thank you very much. And so for the first part of the meeting, which involves members of FLOC and faith leaders, I'll be handing over to Valdemar.
Yeah, I was saying that we are in a very crucial time in the United States because we are being singled out by the political powers in the United States and North Carolina, particularly where the legislatures are supermajority with the Republicans, and they have passed laws that are aimed directly at destroying unions, FLOC. They have a right to work law, of course, but then they passed an agriculture right to work law on top of it to limit our ability to sue growers into the union. And then the Senate Bill 615, which was passed now 3 years ago, that prohibits the payroll dues deduction of agricultural worker unions. And we're the only agricultural union in the state. So we we sued them to stop that law under the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, Equal Protection Clause in the Constitution. And we lost that recently. We're appealing it. The Southern Poverty Law Center and the ACLU are taking up our cause and appealing that case. They're definitely trying to destroy us. But the legal precedents have not deterred us from winning union agreements by creating what we pioneered back in the 1980s, supply chain agreements with major manufacturers and retailers. In agriculture, in our part of the United States, which is the central regions from Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, down to the deep South states, and many places on the East Coast where agriculture are not major corporations. They are small family farms. Small family farms are defined in the U.S. as those who have a total gross income, farm income of less than $1 million. The big corporate growers on the West Coast, like Driscoll's Berries and so on, who hire thousands of workers, is not like the small family farms in the U.S. So the issue of contentions between farmers and farm workers changes from various parts of the United States. And we have to bring people on the bottom of these corporate supply chains to the bargaining table to create commodity prices and farm worker wages that are sustainable. And I think this is a global issue, a global problem in many parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America. You've got peasant farmers who suffer the same conditions as small family farmers in the United States. So I think the future in agriculture must be that we must get these global manufacturers like British American Tobacco to create practical mechanisms on freedom of association. In 2016, in a gathering hosted by the IUF, we brought together agriculture sector unions in Africa, Latin America, and ourselves, and we issued a declaration calling on major tobacco companies to create such a practical mechanisms in their supply chains. In 2017, the Agriculture Trade Worker Group of the IUF endorsed that declaration, and in December or September of 2017, the Global Congress adopted it as well. It is that declaration that we're asking British American Tobacco to implement, this practical mechanism on freedom of association in the U.S. This is what we want to negotiate, a memorandum of understanding. The very same thing we've done with the Campbell Soup Company, what we did with the Vlasic Pickle Company, the Heinz USA Company, the Dean Foods and their subsidiaries, and Jane Green Bay Foods, and eventually the Mount Olive Pickle Company, that broke open the large agreement that we currently have in North Carolina. And all that was done by the impetus given by the manufacturers to their contracted growers or their suppliers. This supply chain strategy is the only thing that's going to work in agriculture, because otherwise you're going to have a system that other unions fight. When other unions fight outsourcing across the United States and now global outsourcing, it's the same thing. They're going to outsource us to death. And I think that until we push them to have a negotiated supply chain agreement that the people on the bottom, the small family farmers and the farm workers, can have a livable and a sustainable wage and a way to raise their families. So with that being said, I think the call that's been issued currently by the IUF, we want to encourage people to sign on and push British American Tobacco to negotiate a memorandum of understanding, creating that practical mechanism on freedom of association. I know that's a big charge, but every time we've done one of these struggles, everybody says it's impossible, you can't do that. When everybody said that Campbell Soup would never sign a supply chain agreement in 1986, they said that a manufacturer will never negotiate an agreement with a group of workers that are not their employees. Well, times are different, and agricultural workers are different. We're excluded from all the protective laws the other unions enjoy in the United States, and even the current modifications offering in the PRO Act, which is a good thing for unions, but the agricultural workers are still excluded. And we've been excluded since the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935. So with that, Brother Richie, I think that we need to figure out a way to continue to put pressure on BAT. And if other manufacturers have created such a memorandum of understanding, there's no reason why BAT could not do the same thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valdemar. Thank you very much for that very important history that puts this into context. And now I'd like to introduce to you Irit Tamer. I hope I pronounced that okay, Irit, from Oxfam USA. Irit, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be with all of you today. Oxfam is a global organization working to eliminate poverty and inequality. And I had the pleasure of being part of the Oxfam team that partnered with FLOC 10 years ago to publish the State of Fear report. The report was groundbreaking on a number of fronts, but most prominently because it utilized a methodology known as the Community-Based Human Rights Impact Assessment, a methodology that Oxfam has been promoting since 2009 and developed by a Canadian organization known as Rights and Democracy. The methodology enables communities to drive a process for assessing human rights impacts as a result of investment projects and supply chains. In these last 10 years, dozens of communities have utilized the tool to demand their rights with multinational corporations and governments around the globe. The report led to a dialogue between FLOC and Reynolds Tobacco for the first time. The anniversary of the State of Fear also coincides with the 10-year anniversary of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which set out a standard and framework for business to respect human rights, not just in their own operations, but in their supply chains as well. On these two anniversaries, we have important successes to celebrate. Many companies now acknowledge their responsibility to respect human rights. Some governments are now requiring companies to conduct human rights due diligence, and civil society is increasingly holding the private sector to account. But these advances are insufficient to address the vast chasm of inequality that COVID-19 has now laid bare. We need to do more. State of Fear uncovered the exploitation of workers, mostly migrants from Mexico, working on tobacco farms of a 5-county region in North Carolina, where at the time, 10 of the world's largest tobacco manufacturers were sourcing tobacco. I had the privilege of accompanying FLOCs on some of the interviews of the workers. Their stories were heartbreaking. The report highlighted how workers were living in deplorable housing, working in unsafe conditions, and living in a state of fear of being deported for speaking out. The exploitation of vulnerable people is not new, but COVID-19 has uncovered this exploitation in a whole new way. We have seen the unequal economic fallout from COVID-19, and it was no accident. It is the result of an economic model that delivers profits for the wealthy at the expense of the many. CEO compensation and Wall Street payouts soar while workers' wages remain stagnant. As multinational companies circle the globe to exploit cheap labor and extract natural resources, workers like those toiling on tobacco farms face slave-like hardships, long hours in the field, harassment in the workplace, and poverty and debt, and exposure to toxic nicotine and pesticides, all while being denied their basic labor and human rights protections. Companies like British American Tobacco have been rigging the rules. corporate power has successfully limited unionization efforts, prevented environmental regulation, and depleted government coffers. They are winning the fight. Inequality is out of control and social unrest is beginning to bubble over. We need businesses to help solve our global challenges. An economic model that truly puts people at the center, protects the most vulnerable, shares profits equitably, and supports rather than undermines democratic governance and the rule of law. Together, governments, the private sector, and civil society can eliminate poverty by ensuring all workers have a living wage, a voice in the workplace, and an opportunity to thrive. At the 20-year anniversary of the State of Fear and the UN Guiding Principles, let us reflect on all the ways that we have been able to rein in corporate power, lift workers and communities, and empower the hardworking men and women in North Carolina to earn a living wage, provide for their families, and realize their fullest potential to live a happy and dignified life. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here in this celebration.
Thank you so much, Eric. That's very important, and it's great to have the support of Oxfam.
Not to be indifferent to the pain, not to be indifferent to injustice, not to be indifferent to war, not to be indifferent to the future, and not to be indifferent to treachery. Those are the verses of the song, but we're doing them in Spanish. Solo le pido a Dios que el dolor no me sea indiferente, que la reseca muerte no me encuentre vacío y solo sin haber hecho lo suficiente. Solo le pido a Dios que el injusto no me sea indiferente, que no me bofetee la otra mejilla, después que una garra me arañó esta suerte. Solo le pido a Dios que la guerra no me sea indiferente. Es un monstruo grande, pisa fuerte a toda la pobre inocencia de la gente. Es un monstruo grande, pisa fuerte a toda la pobre inocencia de la gente.
USA in this campaign. Okay, fantastic. That was a very short excerpt, but it's wonderful when the president of your union also brings to the table the rich traditions of American music that have been brought to the United States by successive migrants over many generations. And I had the privilege of having a long discussion about Mexican American music with Valdemar in a restaurant one night, which I'll never forget. So thank you for being a great labor leader, and thank you for bringing musical tradition to our movement. Valdemar, back to you.
Thank you, Brother Richie. I want to introduce a couple of the farm workers that are in the union. I want to introduce Francisco Javier. He's been a member of FLOC for 10 years. He's been involved in a lot of the campaigns. So he has seen in the middle of the struggle some of the issues that we have had to fight over the last decade. So with that, Francisco, are you ready? ¿Estás listo, Francisco?
Are you ready, Francisco?
Bienvenido.
Mi nombre es Francisco Javier Ramírez Eliseo.
Hi, my name is Francisco Javier Ramirez Alessio. And we're sorry, but the sound is really poor. I've been working for FLOC for 10 years. We're still fighting. And I love to share what we're suffering in North Carolina in the fields and working conditions. Last year, I was there to see what this green monster was about.
Para empezar, ¿qué es lo que es el monstruo verde? El monstruo
So
verde
what is the green monster? The green monster is what happens when you spend too much time in tobacco fields. You start feeling dizzy and you forget everything about yourself. You fall unconscious. That's what we call the green monster. We are grateful for your support when we went to the tobacco company because we wanted to ask for an improvement of prices for producers. Because if they don't make enough money, then they don't pay us either. So that was part of a struggle too.
Gracias.
Thank you.
I was going to say that that comment was very illustrative of the supply chain pricing. If farmers are squeezed by the prevailing wage that's imposed by the Department of Labor, which is good for the worker, the problem of these small family farmers, their profit margin shrinks to the point where they have to offer less hours to the workers. And unless they get better prices from BAT and the tobacco manufacturers, that formula is just not going to work because it pits farmers and farm workers against each other. And people like our members and Francisco suffer the consequences of that inequity in the supply chain. So pricing is probably the bottom issue that we have to address with British American Tobacco. In 1986, when we signed the agreement with Campbell Soup, that was the foremost issue we negotiated in the supply chain agreement. The tomato farmers at that time were getting $34 a ton. In the first union contract, we increased that price to the farmers, I think to about $40-something a ton, more than a $10 increase per ton, which allowed us to negotiate like an 80% wage increase in the first year of the union contract. So it's all the issue of money and it's all math. And a simple high school math student could figure this out when you start talking about the supply chain financial structures. So with that, we'll pass it on to Ana. Ana is an immigrant woman that lives in the Dudley area of North Carolina. So Ana, tu testimonio, por favor.
Sí, buenos días para todos.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ana Solis.
País de origen es Guatemala.
I come from Guatemala originally.
Mi historia mía es mucho más diferente.
My story is quite different to that of other people
Los compañeros
and to the stories of the colleagues, such as here my colleague Francisco. They are hired in Mexico. I was not. I came as a migrant between 2006 and 2007. I arrived in North Carolina and I started working in North Carolina fields, in the tobacco fields. And they also have vegetable production, different types of vegetables, chiles, etc. So I started working in the fields. And why did I start working in tobacco fields? A lot of people ask me why I chose this. And I did because I tried working at a restaurant and I was paid $4.50 an hour, $4.5 an hour. Then the same thing at a bakery. So They took me to the fields one day and they gave me $6.85. So I was like, okay, I'll make more money working in the fields. And I had a family to raise, so in Guatemala. So I decided to join the fields because 6.85 was more than 4.50. But the work was quite different. I started in a tobacco plantation, then leaving, and the tobacco leaf processing by hand. I think back in the day, we didn't have, or they didn't use machines. So we had to remove the leaves by hand. And for us, that was more difficult. For us women, that was more difficult because men had more experience at that time. But that was when I had to work as a man. I had to make money, just like the man.
Perdón, siempre me gana. Dije, no
My
voy a.
apologies, I'm overwhelmed by emotion. I was trying to control my emotions. But when I remember things, I can't help it. It all comes back to me. I'm so sorry.
Gracias, Ana. No te preocupes.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's okay. Life is hard in the fields.
Vamos a hacer todo posible para mejorar esas
So
condiciones.
we're going to try our best to improve your
Justa.
working conditions, that you get fair working conditions.
Adelante juntos, Ana.
Sí,
And we
entonces,
will work together. We will move forward together, Anna.
en esos tiempos no ponían.
Yes, back in the day, there were no toilets.
Pues nomás nos daban como.
And just outside our lunch hour, we just had like 30, 40 minutes of break. And at that time, I had to go to a petrol station to use the toilet and eat and come back because contractors were very demanding. They didn't want us to take rest. And the colleague was mentioning the so-called green monster. I had the same situation. I stopped eating and all the chemical products were in my body. When I was eating, I also tasted them and I didn't want to eat. But I had to get up and they were telling me to drink lemon juice or milk because I couldn't miss work. And I was like, okay, I can't be sacked. So 4:30 in the morning, I had to wait for the van to go for work. I didn't have proper transportation. Thank God I have a car now. So at 4:30 or 5, I had to be waiting for my ride because if the van went by and I wasn't ready, I was left behind. So we had to be there. We had to be on top of things and looking at the contractors and supervisors because otherwise you are jobless. I had to be ready. You're left behind otherwise. I suffered so much in the tobacco industry. And then I went also in the Komoto plantation. And I was working in the fields for 14 years. And 8 months ago, FLOC gave me the chance to work here. And I was very surprised. Why did they give me the chance to work here? I'm not sure still. But I became a member. And then I started working as a volunteer, helping out in the marches, joining the rallies, and they invited me to come along. And then at some point they said, you'll have a chance to work with us. And I was wondering why. I'm not sure whether I'll be capable of doing it. And so far, I'm not even sure whether I'm doing things right. But I've been working for 9 months here, so that might mean that I am doing things right. Or I'm trying at least to be the best, to do my best, because I want to keep my employment here, I want to work here. When I think about it. I don't want to go back to the fields, but if I have to, you can never say never. I might have to go back to it. There's no other place for me to go. If I'm not working here, I'll have to go back to the fields. But at least I have some more experience. I know now that there's a trade union I can go back to. If I'm mistreated as I was before, I can come to the trade union and say, well, that they are mistreating me or mistreating my my colleagues, even my women, my sisters are harassed. I can come back to defend myself and defend the other workers, male and female, if I have to ever go back to the fields. But so far, I'd like to thank FLOC for having me, and I'll try my best for them to be happy with my work. Thank you.
Gracias, Ana.
Presidente.
Thank you, President.
Bueno, muy bien. Brother Richie, I wonder if we can bring Courtney Hoostra, who's representative for Marcy Captor. Courtney?
Hi, Mr. Velasquez. Thank you so much for having me, and I apologize for having to force you to switch the program around, but thank you so much. Thank you for organizing. Thank you for being such a strong leader in the fight for justice for our farm workers. The Congressman Captor wishes she could be here. Unfortunately, with a very busy appropriation season, that just was not possible due to last minute scheduling. But again, thank you. I think the first thing that the Congresswoman would say is, I think she remembers back in 2014 when she was down in North Carolina with you, Mr. Velasquez, in the tobacco fields in North Carolina. I know she was very affected by what she saw and by what she had learned from what you were exposing her to. You know, just the injustice, you know, demonstrated in the fields to these workers. It really hardened her. And then I think that really started with you, you know, the partnership to really fight for this justice for these workers that are toiling in the tobacco fields, you know, day and night. She really, really saw, you know, firsthand what was going on. And I know that still sticks with her today, which is, you know, why she not only fights alongside all of you in the fight for justice for these farm workers just in tobacco fields, but a lot of these agricultural farm laborers that work day in and day out in American fields across the country, wherever they may be, that just don't get the correct pay, they don't get the correct treatment, they don't get the correct accommodations that they need, that they so justly deserve, because they're really, you know, they're really trying to fill our tables and stock our shelves on our grocery stores, and we're so grateful for everything that you guys that they do, that you're doing to support them. The Congresswoman in Congress is currently fighting on the heels of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act to institute, with the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, a small worker and farm worker advisory committee at the federal level, so that there is a sustainable voice for these laborers and for these farmers that deserve this justice. She wants to make sure that they're being heard and that the federal government will account for them and will support them in what they're doing and make sure that they do have the rights that are afforded to many other labor sectors in our country and across the globe. So she thanks you for bringing this fight and bringing a voice to it, and appreciates this conference that's being held. And she looks forward to working with you guys, you know, concurrently in the future to really raise awareness and justice for these valiant workers. So thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Velasquez, for all of your leadership and what you all are doing.
Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate you very much. And all of us send our regards to the Congresswoman. I know she'll be with us every step of the way. Thank you. James, we want to turn over to the faith leaders. Want to introduce Julie Taylor, who's the Executive Director of the National Farm Worker Ministry. And she'll be followed by Sabina Hanlon and Rabbi David Touche in terms of the faith leaders sign-on letter, which has been very successful. So Julie, why don't you open it up with the lead off the faith leaders?
Thank you, Valdemar, and thank you, Secretary General Ritchie. National Farm Worker Ministry is an organization whose mission is to educate, equip, and mobilize people of faith and conscience to support farm worker campaigns. We are grateful to add our voices today to those who have spoken. Farm workers' voices like the ones you are hearing today compel us to act. And so in partnership with FLOC, we sent a letter a couple months ago to British American Tobacco. It's because of our belief that every person is created in the image of God and deserves respect and dignity, that over 650 faith leaders added their names to that letter to seek justice for tobacco farm workers. Those leaders represent multitudes more in congregations and gatherings around the United States and in other countries who seek justice for all workers, especially farm workers, who are some of the most marginalized and exploited in our country. Our social teachings urge us to support their human rights, specifically their right to organize themselves for better lives. That is why we are here today and appreciate that you are joining us in standing in solidarity with farm workers. Our letter calls on BAT to negotiate the Memorandum of Understanding that Valdemar mentioned earlier, to guarantee freedom of association without retaliation for farm workers on Reynolds American contract farms, and to join us in calling British American Tobacco to prohibit contract growers and farm labor contractors from retaliating against farm workers for exercising their basic human rights. We recognize that FLOC, the only farm worker union in North Carolina, makes it possible for farm workers to organize despite their heavy workload, lack of transportation, language challenges, and other barriers. But anti-farm worker union legislation, specifically the Farm Act of 2017, makes it almost impossible for farm workers to organize and engage in collective bargaining without retaliation. Additionally, many Reynolds American contract farms are using farm labor contractors to provide farm labor for their farms. These contractors, as you have heard, are often in violation of BAT's own code of conduct and actively prevent freedom of association. We've heard this from farm worker leaders, farm workers themselves, and it is documented. This is exploitation and violates farm workers' human rights, and it is just wrong. So we appreciate your attention to these concerns and your support in seeking justice for farm workers by addressing these concerns with British American Tobacco. And I will invite my colleague, Reverend Sakina Hamlin, Minister for Economic Justice of the United Church of Christ, to speak to this.
Thank you so much, Julie. We are so very grateful for the partnership of the National Farm Worker Ministry and for being here today with the Farm Labor Organizing Committee of the AFL-CIO and the IUF. The United Church of Christ is a Protestant Christian denomination that is based in the United States, but has great ties in the world. We see our purpose as being to love God with all of our heart, mind, and soul and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves. So therefore, we see our duty as fighting for a just world for all. And world does mean world, not just where we sit, but the world. We recognize that the remnants of colonialism, racism, and ethnocentrism has made this world tainted with sin. It has also made it such that bad economic players and corporations seek to maximize their profits over the literal bodies of workers and what is best for families. In our Christian text in Ephesians, it speaks about that God has it such that we are not wrestling just with those that are people, but we're wrestling with powers, what we call principalities, which is just a spiritual way of saying systems. And so as we heard our sibling Anna and others talk about how they are having to live their lives and to have the basic human rights and dignity stripped from them, we see that as a system that seeks to kill and destroy. But we will not have that on our watch. Therefore, we joined in this effort to make sure that workers are allowed to have their own dignity and to organize for their own rights, to amplify their voices without retaliation, and to be able to be those that fight for sustainable, livable wages. We will not stop until that occurs. We are encouraged by our partners around the world, even in the United Reformed Church in the UK, that could not be with us today to speak, but join with us in this fight, as well as those that are a part of the World Council of Churches and others that seek to repair the breach of colonialism and racism that have given us a world in which workers are deemed less than and profits are put over them and their lives. We join together in all and with all to repair the breach that has occurred. The United Church of Christ is committed to workers' rights. We are committed to a just world for all. And we are committed to making sure that British American tobacco does not continue to benefit by being an absent landlord, as we would say in the US, meaning that you're getting profits, but you're not doing what is right by those to which and for which you're providing a service. In large measure, we as people of faith do seek to apologize, quite honestly, for what has been done. But even in our apology, we want to seek justice and to commit further to being in this fight until it ends. Amen.
The next speaker for us could not actually be present, so he sent his remarks, Rabbi David Touche of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in New York.
Good morning. I am Rabbi David Touche, Senior Consultant to the Center for Jewish Ethics at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia. When we think about what it means to be human, we can turn to Genesis, which declares that all human beings are made b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Each person is a holy being. People are not just cogs in the economic machine that drives the world economy. They're also holy beings that have rights merely by having been born in the image of God. They have the right not to be oppressed, to live lives of dignity. And of course, that is only possible if they earn a living wage and have the right to freedom of association. Those kinds of rights can only be guaranteed to tobacco workers if they are guaranteed by the large tobacco companies. That's why I am urging British American Tobacco to require its farmers to provide those benefits to the farm workers. Each person has the right to self-determination, has the right to ensure safety and health and sufficiency for the worker's family, has the right to freedom of association and to organize a union if the workers choose. In order to provide those benefits to the contract farmers, or through the contract farmers to the workers, British American Tobacco will need to ensure a fair price to the tobacco farms, and ensure that the farm contractors have the obligation to provide these benefits to workers. I urge British American Tobacco to be not only an economic force, but a moral one for the farm workers on whom its crops depend.
And so these voices together, as Sakina said, and as Rabbi Tush said, we are committed to this effort with the Farm Labor Organizing Committee and with you, so that British America will hear us and so that British America will do better. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much to all of you for these important messages that we've received and your support. And we are allied in the belief that all of us have a common humanity around the world. We all share the same rights, including the rights to freely associate and to organise, enter into collective bargaining, and to make sure that we are able to negotiate wages and conditions which are safe, and wages which are living wages everywhere. And towards that, we would now like to move outside the United States and remind everybody that British American Tobacco is a country that operates around the world, and there are many of our affiliates who are having difficulties with this company, difficulties in terms of workers being able to assert their rights. And if I can move now to Latin America, and specifically to Argentina, and if we can hear from Juan Martini, who is president of the Federation of Tobacco Workers from the Republic of Argentina. Juan, over to you.
Sí, buenos días para todos.
So good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to express the problem that we have with BAT, because they are violating our collective bargaining. They wish to outsource people. They bring people from other industries with lower wages, below what we have agreed to in our collective agreements. Is shameful what BAT is doing, because they are constantly violating the agreements that they themselves have signed. And now they've taken on this bad habit of outsourcing and laying off people from the industry, outsourcing, paying less. And all of this is affecting us as workers, because we understand that if there is a collective agreement, it ought to be respected at all times, and not just when they feel like it. But unfortunately, neither the ILO has paid attention to our claim, nor others have listened to us. I wish the ILO would do something. There are other agreements that they have signed, but now they have taken on this habit of outsourcing workers, paying lower wages, and constantly affecting those who are within the company itself. That's why I like to make this call against BAT because of their actions. And I'm really concerned, and if you can help us, we would be more than welcome. Otherwise, BAT will do what it wishes without respecting human rights. They have drivers who are outsourced, and they are laying off in-house workers. And we have done the utmost to respect our co-workers. But the situation in my country is not very good, nor is it elsewhere in the world. There is a lack of jobs, and we are angry at this attitude of the company when they should be respecting the workers. And what they're doing is precisely the opposite. They're bringing people from outside under subcontract with low wages and laying off the regular workers. I'm very sad about this attitude of the company. It's not doing us any favor. They are not honoring the agreements they themselves have signed, and they are outsourcing people, drivers, who are taking over the jobs. We have reported this before the authorities, even at the Ministry of Labor, but they have not paid heed. We understand that what they're doing is wrong. So if you can give us a hand there, we would be very grateful, because collective bargaining must be respected. Otherwise, if they decide to pursue this endeavor of outsourcing and paying less wages, we will all lose out in the end. So any help from you is more than welcome. And could you also notify the company that it should not have this attitude? We cannot let them carry on with this. This is what we're living in Argentina in this day and age. And I know there is a situation of crisis, but the companies should not take advantage of this to the detriment of the workers. I hope we can do something and prevent them from carrying on this kind of attitude. So that's more or less in a nutshell what I wanted to say. And I thank you for the opportunity to express our opinion and to explain what's happening to us in Argentina.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brother Martini. Thank you for that contribution. And we will be doing our utmost to link up our affiliates around the world to take a combined approach towards British American tobacco. We're very privileged to have with us to add some supplementary remarks to Brother Martini. Very privileged to have with us the Regional Secretary of the IUF Latin American region, Gerardo Iglesias. So Gerardo, if I can just ask you now to make some further remarks about the situation in Latin America. Gerardo.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Shane.
Thank you so much, James. I'd like to first of all greet Valdemar. I'd like to greet all the colleagues and friends who are taking part in this meeting. And what Juan Martini just expressed is that we do not just have problems in the tobacco sector, and specifically with BAT, and we also have problems in the fields, but also in plants and manufacturing. New technologies in the past 30, 40 years has reduced the number of jobs needed, of workers needed in the tobacco companies. And right now, not happy with all that, what they aspire to do is to outsource the outsourced labor as a whole, as Martini said. And as he was saying, these outsourced workers will not be covered by a collective agreement. They will not have the right to a trade union, and they will be getting lower wages. There are two remarks I want to add to his words. This year, it is the 100th anniversary of the ILO 11th convention. This convention spoke about trade unions in the agricultural sector. This is 100 years ago, and as our colleagues have already claimed in the US, and we also have examples in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America, we know that we still have plenty of difficulties to organize in trade unions in the agricultural sector. 100 years have gone by, and workers do not have, agricultural workers are discriminated against in this field. Another remark, this year is also the 132nd anniversary of the creation of the Tobacco International Workers Association. It was created in France, in Paris. We've had 132 years after that, and tobacco workers are still fighting, are still struggling to get better working conditions. Once Dan Galling, speaking about the tobacco sector, said something that left an imprint for the rest of my life. We must not forget that the tobacco sector was a founding member of IUF. It was one of the organizations that created our international federation. And as Martini was saying, and also Valdemar said that before him, it is high time that we do something as IUF has always done. It is high time for us to back up the workers in the tobacco industry, be it in the industrial side or the agricultural side of tobacco production. I'm sure we will be successful. We should not hesitate. I am sure that our IUF family is always there for us, and we will make it. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Valdemar. Congratulations to all the speakers and to our colleagues in Argentina who are keeping up the fight and who are working hard on a daily basis for better working conditions. Greetings, everyone.
Thank you very much, Gerardo. Thank you for that important contribution. Now we will move to a different continent, and the tobacco companies have for long periods of time exploited workers, not just in Latin America, not just in the United States, but for a very long time in the continent of Africa as well. And we're very privileged today to introduce to you Juliette Kutibwana. I hope I pronounced your family name properly there, Juliette, who is Organising and Education Secretary and a youth representative for the National Union of Cooperative Movement and Allied Workers in Uganda. And so we're very pleased, Juliette, to welcome you to this event. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, James. Surely you pronounced my name well. Thank you for that. As already introduced, I will not introduce myself again because of time, and I will try to summarize my report, though it was quite longer than what I will give, but I've shared it with Kirill. Probably he will share it to anyone who will need it. As mentioned by James, BAT started earlier on to operate in Africa, mainly in Uganda, as early as 1950s, until it withdrew from Uganda in 2013. BAT worked with the farmers' cooperatives in the region, and all tobacco farmers had an account with BAT by that time. Inputs were provided and debited from the accounts. Likewise, when the crop was harvested, the account was credited until the loan is paid off. Thereafter, farmers receive cash for the additional tobacco sold, and BAT also had a processing plant located in Kampala, Ginger Highway, for producing cigarettes and other tobacco products. However, that was very manipulative because farm inputs were given at a very high cost as compared to the prices of tobacco. BAT tried to freeze the freedom of association, and it was always impossible to organize workers on tobacco farms because farmers and farm workers were detached by the fact that BAT provided inputs to the farmers, so the farmers remained indebted to BAT all the time. So BAT had full control of the farmers, and in the long run, farmers, because we were getting low prices for the tobacco, they paid low wages to the farm workers, and yet farm workers could not freely associate and have a collective bargaining power for higher wages. However, the union put a lot of pressure to the government and the management of BAT to increase the prices of tobacco in Uganda to match the prices in Kenya, which were higher as compared to the prices in Uganda, and also demanded that BAT fulfills its corporate social responsibility. Uganda launched a campaign entitled Tobacco Free Kids that aimed at protecting the children from child labor and ensuring good health for Ugandans working on the tobacco farms. As a result, in 2013, BAT decided to leave Uganda and shifted its operations to Kenya. It tactfully covered another company called Alliance One to grow tobacco in Uganda for its production in Nairobi. BAT rendered so many Ugandans unemployed after suddenly announcing liquidation with no consideration for their families and welfare. Despite the fact that BAT enjoyed monopoly and many subsidies from the government of Uganda, it avoided its fair share of corporate tax payment to the Ugandan government by withdrawing to Kenya. It should be noted that BAT has been the biggest, if not the sole buyer of the tobacco leaf from Uganda, and the benefits to Ugandans who are mainly growers does not match the wealth that BAT has accumulated from this kind of engagement. This is mainly because there is no fair distribution of returns along the tobacco supply chain. Farmers are paid very little for their tobacco leaf, yet tobacco products are very expensive on the market world over. In conclusion, we are saying that although BAT and its ally, that is Alliance One, have decided to withdraw after massive exploitation of growers and workers, we know through extensive research that tons of tobacco leaf from Uganda lie in the stores of BAT based in Kenya. And we therefore demand for justice for the tobacco workers in Uganda who offered their labor to produce their accumulated wealth that BAT is storing in Kenya. Thank you so much. I beg to submit.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Thank you for that contribution. Fantastic. And so that is the speakers that we've had for this program. We've got through them all in very good time, and I thank you for that. I just want to make a few remarks now as we move towards the closure of this very important event. And I think I just want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to the courage of the FLOC members who spoke about their experiences to this event. It takes courage to be a union leader in today's world. It means that you have to stand up for the people that you work with. You have to stand up for what is right. You have to stand up for rights. And when you are in a situation where your very job is at stake, for doing the right thing. It is just, we just need to pay tribute to the courage of those people who do the right thing all of the time. So it is so wonderful to have you both present to this important event, because it is a reminder to us about what we are trying to achieve here. We are trying to achieve the rights for all workers. We're trying to achieve the ability for workers to work in dignity for themselves, dignity for their families, and dignity for the communities in which they live, in which those communities have a future. They have a future that goes beyond exploitation and rights abuses. And I think that's very important. We will be working together with our affiliates to continue the pressure on British American Tobacco. FLOC has pioneered the supply chain organising in many jurisdictions. The work that FLOC has done for agricultural workers and in terms of targeting where the power lies with the corporates, it is a model for us all, and it's a proven method, and it is certainly one in which the IUF and its affiliates will not be dropping anytime soon, because we're determined to go directly to corporates and to hold them to account when we're able to talk to them, hold them to account publicly, try and hold them to account through their shareholders, try and hold them to account through their workforce, and that will not cease. We're determined to do it. So thank you. Thank you for everybody who attended. If I can just remind everybody about the campaign, that the IUF Labour Start campaign, which the link is in the chat, please not just sign it in this particular event, but please distribute that link far and wide. The more messages that British American Tobacco get from this particular event and from all of our affiliates and allies, then the better it is for all of us in fighting this, for the rights of workers in tobacco fields and through the tobacco supply chain, particularly to British American Tobacco in this instance. So with those words, thank you all, and I'll hand over to Valdemar now. Valdemar, over to you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Richie. Listening to Juan Martini and Eduardo, thank you both for your comments. How endemic this issue is in the supply chains of British American Tobacco globally, and that the fact that the outsourcing, the attempt, that is a very typical problem, not all over the world. In our area, we experienced that back in the 80s, which gave impetus to us designing the supply chain strategy. We had labor contractors that supplied workers on independent family farms from the earliest times of our negotiations. And that's why the companies that buy the product, they can compel their suppliers to recognize a procedure for union representation and collective bargaining, the freedom of association mechanism. And that with that ability, we can design a model like we have in Ohio and Michigan, North Carolina, and it spilled over into Virginia, Tennessee a couple of years. A model in which all the suppliers, whether they be independent contractors or not, would be compelled to be part of the freedom of association mechanism. That's how we got the farm labor contractors covered under union agreements in Ohio back in the 80s and early 90s. And let me tell you this, any supplier, whether they're a contractor or an outsourcing company, if the buyer says you must do this as a condition of me buying this commodity, they're going to do it. And and this is where the negotiations take place in terms of the pricing structure in order to create a sustainable wage and sustainable operating conditions for the small family farmers. So what I'd like to do is here in the U.S. is we've been trying to launch an initiative, an alliance between small family farmers and farm workers. Now, on some of our farms, we do have contentions with some of the farmers because we represent different interests, but economically speaking, we're in the same boat. And that's what draws us together to try to create a front between small family farmers and farm workers to negotiate the commodity prices that was going to facilitate good wages and working living conditions for the workers that come to work on those farms. I think you have similar situations in Argentina and Brazil and other in Africa, and we would like to help duplicate this model overseas anywhere that we have counterparts. As we visited the plantations in Malawi, the atrocious conditions that those tenant farmers, outside contractors work is just unacceptable. And so I think that this is a global effort and we have to unite together. And I would ask our counterparts in other countries, if you want to collaborate with us and have us visit you to evaluate how we can help you duplicate some of what we've done, create your own version of it. We'd love to do that and collectively put pressure on these global buyers like British American Tobacco. So with that being said, Brother Richie, I don't have anything else to add, but let's keep the pressure on British American Tobacco and hopefully we'll coalesce. Someday when we're sitting down with British American Tobacco, we would love to have the door open to all our counterparts so we can all negotiate some sustainable system in which our members and our families and our workers can live in peace.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you. So it's just for me now we're going to go out with another piece of music. Thank you, Valdemar. We'll do that. And also, I just want to thank the interpreters for their great work. We would not be able to have this meeting without the interpreters. Fantastic work that you've done. Thanks to all the technical support in the background, the IUF staff who's worked on this, your staff, Valdemar, it's been fantastic. So thank you to everyone and thank you to all of the participants, everybody who joined this, because although we didn't have time for questions and comments and things like that, it's the activity that happens from now on, which is most important. So thank you to everyone. And if you just want to hang in to the stay with us, you will be entertained in a fabulous fashion if you can stay. Thank you.
Well, now this next song we wrote for Urbano Ramirez, was undocumented worker working in the cucumber and tobacco fields of North Carolina. And this was during the whole Mount Olive campaign. And he was feeling very ill, right close to noon. And as they were changing fields from the cucumber to the tobacco fields, he went to the supervisors saying he was feeling really, really bad. So the supervisor said, well, just go sit under that tree, a lone tree that was sitting in the middle of the field. And so he did. And when the work was done that day, nobody bothered to go back to look under the tree. They just loaded the bus and took the workers back to the labor camp. When he didn't return that evening, his co-workers began to look for him. They looked all over, and several days later, a couple of them walked back to the last time they had seen him in that field and found his body decomposed beyond recognition under that tree. But I think this underscores the story of farm workers being treated like just like some kind of useless pieces to a machinery that once they're done, they throw them out. And so we wrote this song for Urbano, and hopefully there won't be many more of those kinds of deaths. They left his body just to, like other cases, just to rot out in the field. This is the kind of stuff we have to stop. The workers have a right to ask for medical attention when they need it, particularly now in this era of COVID. We push for the workers to get paid their sick leave and all of those things. So, and agricultural workers continue to be some of the most underserved workers in terms of healthcare in this country. But that's why we fight, and that's why we build this movement. And so we wrote this song for Urbano. Like those who came before him, faceless man without a name, to cross the southern border to a land that has no shame. They'll take his sweat and blood and put food upon our tables, while his own children starve in the mountains of Guerrero. In the fields of Carolina, side the long tobacco rows, they left Urbano dying, far away from his own home. Les cuento de un obrero que se llamaba Urbano, que fue dar su vida en Norte Carolina, dando sudor y sangre, dando comida a los ricos, mientras sus mismos hijos sufren hambre en Guerrero. En la corte del pipino al tabaco lo consumó, lo dejaron ahí debajo de un árbol donde se murió. They say we are no good, outlaws, thieves, and beggars. You can say that to Urbano if you can make your way to heaven. They can take all the money that our hands have made of plenty and shape the golden calf that you worship more than any. In the field